About one more minute this evening and we'll get started. Sir, you're good to go? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock, so I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Please join me for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Here.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
Mr. Yested,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Here.
Ms. Carlson,
Here.
and I expect that Ms. Duncan is on her way. I haven't heard otherwise.
Great, appreciate that. Thank you. Under correspondence and agenda changes for the Assembly and the public's note, item J has been pulled this evening, so we will not be attending to item J. Is there any other correspondence or agenda changes? Seeing none, no ceremonial matters. Tonight we do have a scheduled special report, which is an update on the airport terminal improvement project. John, I believe Michael is prepared to, well, prepared. We hope he's prepared. Come on up, Michael.
Is getting the screen share and turning on the mic to work properly. Come on up, Garrett. Share that. Slideshow. Okay. Sorry, the screen sharing just it's not working properly. There it goes. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. My name is Michael Harmon, municipal engineer. Tonight we're going to us who's the architect from McCool, Carlson and Green on the project. To go through some of the key milestones in progress since we last spoke. Let's see, move into the next. Technical difficulties, move to the next slide. God. See if Garrett can figure it out.
It's one of those that always works well 5 minutes before the meeting.
Oh, it's this screen share. If we could drop that, it would. Be fine. Maybe that's gonna catch up. Stop share. Okay, let's try. See if this works.
You have to hit resume slideshow.
Change. Okay. Thank you very much, Centennial Hall staff. So since we last spoke about a year ago, I did a presentation in September 22. We've accomplished some key sort of administrative milestones I have highlighted here in dark, but tonight we want to focus in on the red elements here, which is our phase 1 construction that will be happening in the near term, and the public outreach we're working on to increase awareness or interior design elements that have progressed quite a bit since we last spoke. And then sort of what happens during construction and the phasing of that and how it impacts the airlines and passengers alike as they go through our terminal. Funding hasn't changed significantly in terms of the base makeup of what we're doing here. We're maximizing our bond proceeds, which are supported by a passenger facility charge that's on each ticket for the passengers who go through our terminal. We're leveraging that as match against 2 significant grants, one of which is a TSA grant listed here for the design and construction of the baggage screening area. And then our much larger grant that we've progressed greatly on is through a partnership with FAA and DOT to fund the remaining 32 million. So that brings us up to a total of just over $40 million budget on this project, which is progressing quite well. We have paperwork coming in today from FAA in regards to this sort of phase 1 remaining piece. So we're feeling pretty good that the money's coming. It's just a matter of when that actually gets secured in Melissa Haley's hands so we really can start the construction. We've done everything we can to position ourselves for an October start date, but the funding sort of has a life of its own to get all the ducks in a row to see us progress and start as soon as that's available. So with that, I'll pass it over to Garrett to kind of walk us through a tour of how the public input is coming in and helping him with the architectural design, what he's doing with that, and some of the construction phasing details.
Thanks, Michael. Garrett Bertner, architect with MCG Explore Design. So we've been working phase 1 primarily of this project, and that's mostly what we're going to see tonight. We've been doing some public engagement with an online survey through the city's website, and that was pretty successful, we felt. We had 377 folks in the community respond to that online survey. And the content in that was thematic. So looking for ranking of potential themes that could inform the design here, as well as selecting an exterior color scheme for the additions of the building, which is part of phase 1. So what we're seeing is part of a rendering of phase 1 addition there, and on the left, and then on the right, some of those themes and how they were ranked by the folks in the survey. So we have these images. We did an image selection ranking, and those on the bottom were among the highest ranked. So focus on the natural beauty of the place, of the way that the city interacts with that natural beauty, of the cultural resources, and the maritime adventure / fishing industry were highly ranked themes. We will have a second round of and we're also going to be posting here this month some signage at the airport so that everyone using the airport is aware of the upcoming project and not surprised by the work that's going to start. So this is actually from Visit Sitka's website, the storyline, which we felt was a really strong and apt narrative about the place. And so we use that to inform what we did. And then the three at the bottom are kind of three design touch points that we're going to be referring to and using throughout the process. So the aesthetic informed by the natural environment, a theme of maritime adventures, and then when we are working signage, wayfinding, and artwork, cultural heritage and history. So the next several slides are kind of a quick visual tour of the project design. I'm going to start at the exterior, and you're seeing from the air side there, of course, with the aircraft, the future completed project with additions all along the air side. And then these arrows, the blue arrows, will key into renderings that we're going to see on the coming slides. So that first rendering from the air side, in the foreground is the main passenger screening and hold room addition. It's a 2-story addition. And then there's a passenger bridge that connects over to the jetway there, and that is above the new baggage makeup room. So where the screen baggage is picked up by the carts and delivered to the planes. So now spinning that around to the land side. Phase 2 will include renovations of the whole existing terminal building, kind of seen in the middle there, as well as a canopy addition and some smaller building additions along the land side there. And this is part of the project that we're still actively in design development on. So here's a concept rendering from that land side with that new canopy and 2 kind of focal points for the 2 entrances to the building. One of the things we intend to include in the next round of engagement, public engagement survey, is to get some ideas on how we can integrate those thematic elements that the first round identified into this public facade of the building. So now moving inside, similarly, this is a cutaway plan of the first floor, and then those arrows key into the renderings. So the golden shaded areas are the phase 1 addition areas, and the majority of the rest is the existing terminal, with some along the right side being phase 2 addition. So this view A is walking into the new queuing area with the passenger screening for TSA off to the right there. So you can start to see here some of the natural material patterns, elements, and the maritime imagery. And we're going to be looking for public input on which images and where they go in the terminal as part of that next round. So if I pop back, sorry, to B there. So this view B, we're going to be seeing the level 1 hold room. And that's that. You see out to the airfield there. So there are two ground loading doors for potential gates there. And then moving up to the second floor, we've got 3 renderings up there. You can see again the golden additions. And then the first view we're going to see is looking out across the level 2 hold room over the stairs. And the next one will be looking back D from the other direction. And E is a sort of detail of that. So upstairs, we have a more vaulted space, more natural elements, elevator, escalator, stair for vertical circulation. got some internal, a central monitor window there to bring some light, natural light in the middle. And then looking back the other direction in that space. So we'll also be working on the furniture design package. This is some preliminary selections, but that's an important part of making this feel holistic. There's toilet rooms upstairs, both kind of family and group toilet rooms, vending space. And then back on the right there is also part of the hold room waiting area, is what we envisioned as a kind of future concession location. So right now it's more of a lounge type of waiting space, but that could be a future tenant space for concessions.
Just want to add too, I know tonight we're mostly focused on the phase one section, which is all new construction. So, you know, you can really visualize all this new construction looking good. And what common question I get is, well, how's that work with the old terminal? And one of my best examples that I help folks with on that is the retransformation we've done in this building, which Garrett was the architect on. This is an existing building we remodeled, and the library the same. So when we go in, we can do a really good job to integrate the new with the old. So when you walk in, you should feel like you're in a brand new building throughout, and it all ties together and matches well, especially from an interior. It's a little harder on the exterior, certainly, but interior, you should feel a homey space that ties together, just like this building.
Yep, excellent point. So the last part that I wanted to share is a little bit about the phase construction, and I'm just going to cover phase one, which is broken into a couple subphases. So here the plan we're seeing is what we're calling phase 1A1, and that's what's starting here next month. The beauty of this approach is that on the right, the pink area is the construction work area, and that's that new hold room addition. And this is able to be constructed with a very minimal impact to the existing terminal. So we'll have the same type of loading scenario, same type of baggage flow, pretty low impact to operations in this first part of phase one. That's expected to go through the winter and the spring. Things get a little more exciting when we get into phase 1A2. That's when we start to build that new hold room, or sorry, not the hold room, but the baggage makeup addition there in the center. So that's going to require some temporary facilities on the site to handle baggage makeup, as well as some temporary flow for passengers and baggage. So we've been working this quite diligently with DOT and the airline tenants to make sure that all of everybody's concerns for operations is being addressed. So I won't say it's going to be easy, but we have a plan that we feel good will work.
And I think the notable thing here for the passengers is this, the ground boarding phase. So we know what our weather's like here. So everyone sort of, it's a better time of year to do it, but that'll be an impact for some. But as we've seen, we're getting more and more ground boarding, and the airlines are getting pretty good at making that work in Sitka. So just be aware we'll have phases that will affect that. Okay, well, with that, I think we made it within our time even with my mishaps in the start there. Encourage everybody to give us feedback. We have a project website there, Explore Airport Design, and also just sort of next immediate steps here. We'll continue to do stakeholder connections, public outreach, phase one construction. soon as the funding comes available, we'll get started on that. Lease negotiations are ongoing. I know you have an item later tonight on the agenda, and that's an important one and a big one for the long-term stability of the airport, that our property leases all work out and this comes together. Winter of 2023 here coming up, we'll have phase 2 design complete and more presentations and outreach on that. And looking for the whole project to be done by the end of 2025. And in order to do that, we need to secure the remaining grant funds. We'll be doing that over continuing. It comes in 3 different phases. So we will continue to apply on those 3 different funding cycles to get the whole project completed. With that, if you have any questions, comments, or for us, we're presented everything.
Anything for Michael while he's in front of us? Great. We thank you both for your time this evening, and please.
Sorry, jumped in there late. Hi, I'm JJ. Nice to meet you, Garrett. Questions on kind of that phasing in particular next summer. From what I can tell, that's what you were talking about, Michael, or all of that is the ground boardings will be from next spring through next winter. And that's hard. Yeah, I see where we're at and why we're there and how it came to it. And overall, the pieces fit in that manner. Just, is there, you say there's a community engagement phase, you want people to know that's a tough deal. And we have so many thousands of people come through our airport, especially in the summertime, to have that be that pinch point. I get it. That's a concern. Whatever you can do to address that for our residents, for their quality of life, and for our visitors. That's more of a comment than a question, but yeah, that's a big highlight here. The rest of the phasing makes so much sense, and it is where it needs to be. That's quite the pinch point. Then on the positives, these interiors are great, the flow, excellent. Over time of the iterations I've seen of this potential airport, this is definitely the one that makes the most sense and has the most positive impact for flows with the separation of the spaces. The family restrooms, please and thank you. Also, and just regular restrooms, having changing tables in both sexes is something that I find very valuable. If we can get that blocked in and installed, thank you. In the design 2 phase for the exterior and the front, perhaps a bit more of attention to kind of a welcoming feel there. That can be done with lighting, that can be done with a lot of things, but the slant of that roof as is just doesn't quite kind of hit that picturesque quaintness of this town, and capturing the beauty of and the kind of experience of welcome to this town. The door location on the phase 1 ground floor, that's a bit tough. Perhaps on the sides could be a little bit better protected from weather. Some wash might be happening, or just some snow drops there. Could some ice damming potentially, and icicles and whatnot on people's heads. It doesn't seem.
I'm smiling because we've been talking about that one
Okay.
a lot. That's my review comment. So
Okay,
yeah,
yep.
we're
That
together.
just a
Yes.
little switch. Mhm,
Mr. Harmon
mhm.
brought that one to me, and we've got
Mhm.
some canopies at those ground loading doors now. It's just
Mhm.
this rendering predates it. So
Okay,
thank you. Very
yes.
good comment.
That's great. I think the potentials here are absolutely, be absolutely stunning for people's experience in those spaces. Waiting in airports is one of the things we find ourselves doing a lot, and just we look around and we really experience a place through that kind of time and passing. And the viewpoints are great. The kind of the colors, textures, themes you have here, as you know, this building is a like living example of your firm's work. So thank you for that attention. The simplisticness of it works, but then also kind of adding a little more flair to that entry, which you're still in design, would be nice. It's not too often you get to design civic buildings of this scale and this impact. And whenever we can do, you know, within budget and time, to make it welcoming and valuable is effortful. You know, we'd say once in a generation, but we've kind of done this too here with this renovation expansion of the antenna building and now with this airport. But civic architecture has a place in the world, and it is that of representing the community and its visions for past, present, and future. So thank you very much.
Anything else? Yeah, I was also wondering about the snow and how you were going to plow it with all those pillars in the way right there, but sounds like that's been addressed. So appreciate both of your time this evening. It's exciting to see this project come to fruition. You know, Michael, I had a question when this project first started way back when, that, you know, it was a 20 or 30-year loan. And I asked you if we were going to get our money's worth out of it, if we were going to get 30 years. It appears with this building that we have the potential to. You know, there's a couple things that I'll be connecting with you offline so that you can answer a little more thoroughly. Yeah, I appreciate both of your times this evening.
Thank you.
Continuing on with special reports this evening, is there anyone here for government to government? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? School district? And students and guests? That'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. All the remarks I am making this evening are directly to the Assembly. And I would like, through the Assembly and through the chair, to wish Steve Bradshaw a speedy recovery. It is something that happened at the beginning of his term, and it's important to have continuity of leadership. It's almost reminiscent of Aaron Rodgers' injury on his opening game for the Jets yesterday. So we do need that leadership, and I hope he gets well soon. Today I would be remiss if I didn't mention September 11th. Today is the 12th, though. I happen to have been in New Jersey. My former office overlooked Manhattan from the Jersey side, and I managed to watch it unfold at a distance, and also managed to set up and run our emergency command center at our hospital, which was probably the last official thing that I did in New Jersey as I moved from there to Sitka. So it weighs heavily on me, and as a remembrance to more than 3,000 people who have passed. And this is one of the things that is becoming marginalized, as so many of true American events have been. One thing I'd like to bring up, and I will call it a tale of two ditties, and I'm not going to sing, but ditty number one is when we were having a problem with the fishery and the legal system in Washington. A judge was going to block our trawlers, and there was a hue and cry, and justifiably the Assembly got up and made resolutions, and there were speeches, and there were many, many things that happened at this table where people were speaking about support. So let us just fast forward to now, and that it is through the largesse of the Assembly that gave Sitka Community Hospital to search. And for a fantastic price, et cetera, et cetera. And what's happening here, and I've mentioned it before, is that home health is something that is very important. And I think the assembly needs to invite a member of search to present to this body and to the public what's going on with home health and have a discussion which allows the citizens to actually engage and ask questions. And I think this is very important because that's just the way it should be. They need to be transparent and the city needs to get on it. Thank you.
Anyone else for persons to be heard this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us to consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, approve the minutes of the August 22nd assembly meeting. Item B, approve the following marijuana license renewal applications and forward to the Marijuana Control Board without objection. Number one, standard marijuana cultivation facility license renewal application submitted by AKO Farms LLC at 1210 Beardsley Way and AKO Farms LLC DBA AKO 2 at 213 Price Street. And two, a retail marijuana store license renewal application submitted by AKO Farms LLC DBA AKO Farms Direct at 1210 Beardsley Way. And three, a marijuana concentrate manufacturing facility license renewal application submitted by AKO Farms LLC at 1210 Beardsley Way.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any public comment? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve the consent agenda, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbach,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
and Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0.
Brings us tonight to item C.
I move to appoint Woody Woodmark to a 3-year term on Health Needs and Human Services, Steve Black to a 3-year term on Parks and Recreation Committee, and reappoint Ben Huey to a 3-year term on Parks and Recreation Committee.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint those three individuals. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Ween. As I've said in the past, I'll always step up to say thank you to all the individuals who wish to serve the public. Woody Woodmark, I know he's very busy at the level of the tribe, but he's also the representative of the tribe to search. And so he's very much involved in health needs and human services. And so I think he is, I'm glad he stepped up because he'll be a great addition to the Health Needs and Human Services Commission. Steve Black, not really sure I know who he is. I read through his mini CV. And again, I thank him for stepping up for Parks and Rec. It looks like he's involved in a lot of kids activity. And Ben Huey, as always, is made for the Parks and Rec because that's what he does so well. And so I'd like to thank them all for participating and for Ben for seeking another term. So thank you.
Is there any other public comment on the commission or the appointment of those three names? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to appoint Mr. Woodwork to the Health Needs and Human Services Commission, Mr. Black to the Parks and Rec Committee, and then Mr. Huey to the Parks and Rec Committee. Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbach,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item C.
Item D, please.
I nominate Robin Sherman, Chris Spivey, and Jeremy Twaddle to fill an unexpired term on the Planning Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to nominate 3 individuals to the Planning Commission. Is there any public comment on the nominees?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. As I've mentioned previously, the Planning Commission is clearly the most important commission that we have. They work very hard. It is a commission that you actually have to have knowledge about, as opposed to just an opinion. And so this has become interesting, and I will leave it with one statement, because you now tonight have the ability to completely change the direction of the planning committee, of the planning commission. So my notion is you have a choice between calluses or palaces, and you need to take that seriously. And you have to remember, in essence, we're a blue collar town. People know how to build and do things. And when you're on the planning commission and making zoning and going through all these things, you have that real world stuff. So when you make your decision, calluses or palaces. Thank you.
Hi, Daryl Windsor,
And Stacy Midry.
and I'm going to speak for both of us. We know you guys got a hard decision ahead of you, and we're not here to in support of any one individual, but we would hope that you would support experience. So that's basically what we have to say.
Yes.
Anything
you.
to add?
Nope, that's
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the nominees?
I'm going to speak on behalf of myself. Firstly, Chris Spivey. I'll be honest and say that I regret resigning, and I have worked hard on the Planning Commission for a very long time, and it has become a part of my life, and I want to continue that part of my life that has been a positive thing in both the community and in myself personally. So thank you.
Anyone else on the nominations to fill the Planning Commission vacancy? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Chris?
I do feel as though I need to disclose something here. Mr. Twaddle was my previous employer over 2 years ago now, and I'd still consider us friends, I think. So I just want to disclose that, but that part of it doesn't really have any bearing on my choice tonight.
Understood. Thank you for that. I understand you're no longer employed and don't receive any compensation from, and you believe that you can act in an unbiased manner tonight. Thank you for the disclosure. We appreciate that. Tor?
Yeah, when I saw this, on our packet, I was a little bit surprised to see Chris's name back up there. And when I saw that he'd shaved, I almost didn't recognize him, or at least trimmed his beard. But I've been a liaison now for 4 years straight, or 3 or 4 years anyway. And, you know, looking at all the candidates, and again, I think this is one where we are in a win-win. I don't think there's anybody who's not qualified there. But I would agree with the people who testified tonight, saying his experience is a good thing, and I've always enjoyed working with Chris. I don't always agree with him, but he runs a fair meeting and he runs it well. Or when he was chair, and I don't know if he'll be chair again if he gets back, but I for one wouldn't mind seeing him back up there, you know, for every other Wednesday. I thought about this and I thought, well, is it time for something different? But honestly, it'd be hard pressed to find somebody who works harder at being impartial than Chris. So for what it's worth.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Tor, for your comments. First, I just want to thank everyone who applied for applying. It takes a lot just to even put your name out there. I guess my opinion is, although I appreciate all the work that has been done, the experience that's been put in, I think a little bit of a change up might be healthy. I believe that Robin Sherman would be a good person to have on there. Her resume is as outstanding. She may not have experience in this body or on the planning commission, but I've worked with her before, and I believe that she is a very thoughtful, well-balanced person who thinks deeply and cares very much for this town. And I think she's someone who would help bring some fresh direction to the assembly.
We'll come back to you. Tim?
Yeah, I think we're spoiled for choice again, and I appreciate that about Sitka. I think it's one of the strengths that we bring as our community. We have lots of experience in lots of different ways. I'm also leaning in the direction of Robin Sherman at this time. And it's less because I know about changes to the commission, but I appreciated what I read about her experience, and I think it would be a benefit to our community.
And Chris, sorry, I associated your disclosure with your speaking first, and that was not the case. So
Yeah,
please.
I know. I was questioning whether it should just keep going or not. But we do have 3 great candidates here. And what really settled it for me was the direction that I felt like Sitka and I believe this body wants to go. And that's land expansion and future development. And if we're talking experience there on that subject, I believe Jeremy's the #1 choice. He's a contractor, has been building residential homes for quite a while. In fact, some of our affordable housing that we see projected is actually a house design that Jeremy and I had done together for a house for me. And it's been kind of the model of some of our affordable housing in this community. Jeremy's also done multiple developments, subdivisions. So he definitely has an idea of what it takes to make these developments and how to proceed with them. I know he's spent some time with the Planning Commission. I don't know exactly how many years, but he definitely has experience for the job. And I know with the direction, and one of my campaign promises was opening up land for future development. I really believe he's the guy to help push it through and see it through while he's on the commission. So that's who I'm throwing my support behind.
I guess it's hard to me to speak about these candidates because it's been indicated that this would be a partisan decision, and in no way do I make decisions up here based on that. I make decisions based off of Sitka. So when I look forward, this decision will be based off of Sitka, most definitely. Chris Spivey has spent quite a long time building knowledge on the Planning Commission. Jeremy Twaddle has spent quite a long time with his hands in the dirt. But for me, the resume of Robin Sherman that was put forward was intriguing. There's planning actions in there. There's some things that I believe are going to help the Planning Commission move forward. And not that any of the other candidates wouldn't have done that. I think we've seen over the last 10 plus years, I think it was for Chris, that he has done that. So I do know that there will be turnover again. I hope whoever is not selected tonight will jump back or put their name back in the hat for Planning Commission because it is an important commission. It's the commission that the Assembly has given the most authority to and that we rely the heaviest upon. It's also the heaviest workload. And with the people say that the Assembly gets little thanks. I think the Planning Commission gets even less. They meet just as frequently, work just as hard as the Assembly for even less recognition there. So I do appreciate everybody who continues to serve on there, and we'll see how this happens tonight. JJ?
I'd like to see this type of great competition on every one of our boards and commissions appointments. This involvement with the community is always a mainstay of passion, and to see so many people that are well qualified want to be involved in planning the future of this community is really inspiring and makes it hard because there's such great attributes of each one of these three that would do great things for the Planning Commission. I think Jeremy could do more as a business building, so that would be a great asset too. Don't know what the conflict is there, if you can make decisions and then be doing the work, but the experience of Chris, the vision of and background, maybe not necessarily in Sitka, of Robin, and then just the multilateralness of Jeremy's experience makes it really challenging. But if we're looking for a great pairing with the rest of the group to decide kind of the next steps of Sitka when we do expand, and we're looking for new land, but also considering, making what we have a denser or more related to our current situation. I think the complexities of all of that, I think Robin would be a really good person on the Planning Commission.
Any other comments from the Assembly before we vote? So this evening, you'll state your choice of applicant when called on by Sarah. Sarah?
All right, Mr. Pike,
Robin.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Sherman?
Mr. Mosier,
Robin,
Ms. Carlson,
Robin Sherman.
Mr. Christensen,
Sherman.
and Mr. Yestad.
Twaddle.
All right, Robin Sherman is your new Planning Commissioner.
Thank you. Sure, yeah. Thank you for those who applied. As I stated, there will be some vacancies coming up again. That seats do rotate there on a fairly regular basis. So I would hope to see those applicants again. It has been requested to take a break before we get into our next item. So the Assembly will take a brief recess and be seated when we're ready to reconvene. Works now. Well, I extend gratitude to everyone who's in here tonight because apparently Zool Bailey is playing next door and he has a line out the door. But you all are the hardcore people that wanted to stay for this most entertaining show. So thank you. Thank you. All right. So the assembly is seated. We will jump back into our agenda tonight, starting on item D or E, excuse me.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-20 on second and final reading, Title II Administration, Chapter 2.04, City and Borough Assembly of the Sitka General Code by updating sections 2.04.190 salaries and compensation and 2.04.195 salaries for assembly members and mayor.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-20. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Ween. At our last meeting on August 22nd, I had voiced my objection to giving this, in quotes, raise. My notion still stands that I am certainly against it, but I also stand by my suggestion. And if you're so interested in using city money, as I had mentioned, to create the assembly fund with these monies. And if you put it in there, it won't be subject to taxation. So you'll get the full dollar value. And then every year, just like the nonprofit, you can give it to something worthy. And I think that this represents approximately $46,000. And I think that the first grant should be to the childcare issue in their groups. I don't feel that this is appropriate. I heard all the discussion last time, and I'm sorry it didn't resonate. If you're going to keep the money, then use it well. And that means the assembly fund, and every year the assembly can vote to a worthy cause. And I think that that is what Sitka is all about. And most recently, our pressing issue is childcare. So thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Kevin? Oh, yes, yes, there is one telephonic. Thank you, Sarah.
Hello.
Hi, Valerie. It's Sarah calling from the assembly
Hi.
meeting. We are at item E. If you'd like to state your name for the record, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
My name is Valerie Nelson. I'm currently on a flight headed towards Alaska, and I wanted to speak to this issue because I don't believe it's right that the assembly should be voting on their own raises. And if they look back at the decision, I think in 2002, I was a former mayor, former assembly member. We decided it wasn't right for us to vote our own raises in. And many people that I've talked to feel like you people don't listen. You make up your minds before you go into the meeting. And public testimony is a reason for you to listen and make informed decisions. And I believe that you should put it to the voters. They voted, I think, significantly in favor to approve it back in 2002. And thereby it wasn't people being arrogant voting themselves a raise. So thank you for calling me, and have a good evening. Bye.
And that'll bring it back to the assembly for deliberation. Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was only going to comment to say that, we spoke quite in detail last week, and I don't really feel like I have anything to add. And I'm in support of this. Thank you.
JJ?
I was not at the assembly meeting last time, so I reviewed the video and kind of caught up myself with the discussion. So I feel like I'm able to jump in now and share and be up to speed. That 20 years is a long time, and as been stated by my fellow assembly members, that this isn't necessarily voting ourselves a raise. It's just to keep averages average, and there's nothing self-rewarding in this. It's just addressing something that is baseline and just to keep it consistent. So $200 more a month, 500 total a month for at least 100 pages of review every 2 weeks, and making big decisions for this town, and the time and effort we spend to meet people and discuss things one-on-one and in groups and bring that opinions to this table is priceless on the value that I think we bring, or at least we try to bring, at least I try to bring. And the little bit of money here and there is not something that I find that the voters need to get to expect, especially since they did 20 years ago decide that this was a good use of funds. Thank you.
John?
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to clarify a couple things that should be helpful for the community. Is that I hear that assembly members are voting on their own salaries when in fact this section of charter is written, you are voting for a future assembly. And the reason I brought this forward, and that's why assembly members are not voting on their own raise, is I brought it forward with the understanding that 3 seats are potentially changing out in this election, and then 3 seats could potentially change out in the next election. That was the time to get the most change in the assembly and have this currently sitting body give them the opportunity to vote for the future assembly's pay. And I'd also like to add on the issue of bringing it to the voters. The voters voted this into the home rule charter, which gave the assembly this responsibility to take on. So it has had the voice of the voters on it when it was established. Thanks.
Anything further from the assembly? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-20 on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosier.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on second and final reading.
New business item F, please.
I move to approve resolution 2023-25 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for the U.S. Department of Energy Grid Deployment Office, Section 247, maintaining and enhancing hydroelectricity incentive program for the Green Lake Rehabilitation Phase 2 and 3 project.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. John, I understand Cord is here for a brief introduction.
That's correct. And while he comes up, if you don't mind, I'll
Please.
just add some more to this. Mayor, if you remember during our visit to DC, we did a lot of lobbying on our legislative priorities, and Green Lake has always been and will continue to be a big focus of ours as we try to get these follow-on phases completed. And Department of Energy at the time, when we were talking to them, handed us a card of 3 programs that we were very interested in. It was that 242, 247, and 243. I can't remember if it's the 242 or 243 that we were awarded recently, but this is a follow-on of that and the next program of that 247. So with that, Cord can explain the intricacies.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Cord Christensen, Generation System Manager for the Electric Department. It really is, I think, fairly well spelled out here, but as John said, this is the second and third phase of what we began in the spring of 2021. Phase 1 was the waterworks. Phase 2 and 3 are the kind of inside electrical work within the power plant. In 45 years of operation, and so we're doing a restoration to refurbish it and make it where it's hopefully good for another 40, 50 years. But if anyone has any specific questions, happy to answer them.
And if we do have questions, we can call you back up after public comment.
Okay,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Is there any public comment on resolution 23-25?
Richard Ween. As you know, this is to ask the administrator to apply for a U.S. Department of Energy grid deployment, maintenance, and enhancement for hydroelectricity incentive program for Green Lake rehabilitation phase 2 and 3. Of note, part of it is while integrating renewable energy resources such as wind and solar. We've been hearing a lot about ETIPS, and I'm sure this is all related and will probably be within the grant. I have to say that it is, we'll be asking for $3.6 million, but the entire cost of phase 2 and 3 will be $11 million. So there's still a bit of a ways to go if we are awarded for that. For historians out there, the Green Lake was 1982 when it was built, and it supplies 40% of Sitka's energy. But I do have to tell you, putting windmills here with all the raptors, I think that that is murder. And I think that it is, no matter, put one on your sailboat, you may get a seagull, but if you put them out in the bush, even though they may not be seen, I can assure you I'll be harvesting eagle feathers there very soon. And so I think that's not a very good idea if this is tied in. If you, in order to get this money, have to start putting windmills up here, especially with what's going on. If you follow windmill science and all the problems they're having, that's a no-go. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how you envision solar here in Sitka. I think that for certain uses, maybe yes, but I don't see anything in the memo which gives us an idea of how you plan to integrate all of this into a big system. Thank you. Oh, and also, it's not a bad thing to get the money.
Is there any further comment on the resolution? Back to the assembly for deliberation. John, I just want to thank you and your staff for utilizing the opportunities that we did learn about in DC. It's good to see that this trip has already paid dividends in one big lump sum, and has I believe the very high potential to pay dividends in this. And this is stuff I don't believe we would have learned of, or we would have been very delayed of learning about unless we went. So I appreciate you maximizing that trip to its fullest potential. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve resolution 2023-25 on first and final reading, Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Yestad.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item F.
Item G, please.
I move to approve a consent to assignment of lease between the city and borough of Sitka, MCG Constructions Incorporated, and Co-Alaska Inc., DBA Seacon for Granite Creek lease areas 2 and 3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the lease assignment. John, I understand Ron is here to introduce this to us.
Yes, Mayor.
Good evening. My name is Ron Vincent. I'm the Public Works Director for the City and Borough of Sitka. In December of 2021, the City and Borough of Sitka publicly advertised a request for proposal to solicit bids for mineral extraction lease at the Granite Creek lease areas 2 and 3. In January of 2022, the solicitation closed with only one applicant, one bid on the RFP. That applicant was, or that bid was MCG Constructors. Moving forward in October 2022, the city engaged in a 5-year lease as follow-up to that RFP. And then moving forward into April of 2023, citing the unfortunate passing of a principal member of the lessee's business operations, MCG formally requested consent from CBS to reassign the role of lessee from MCG to Kalaska DBA Seacon. So as part of the analysis that we performed here, recognizing that the lessee was exercising the terms of the lease identified in section 8, which identifies some of the terms for reassigning a lease from themselves to another entity. The city performed an analysis and looked at 3 primary components, looked at financial compliance, safety compliance, and environmental compliance to make sure that one, MCG wasn't leaving anything potentially behind that would impede progress or positive growth of the intended secondary lease there. And then 2, to make sure that Seacon or Kalaska was able to take on the lease successfully and was set up for success. So in all 3 of those areas, we were able to find that both parties were compliant and in good standing. We looked at MSHA records as well as DEC records for the MSGP permits out there, and found that everybody's in compliance. At this point, the city is recommending to move forward with the reassignment. We do have members from both parties here this evening to speak if necessary, and I am here as well.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on the consent of assignment of a lease? Assembly deliberation? Brian, I do have a question for you. I believe I know the answers to both of these, but would like to hear it from you. On number 1, is this legal for us to do this assignment in this way, i.e. we don't have to go back out to bid? And number 2, is it the correct thing to do in that circumstance?
Question 1, yes, we've done this on a number of occasions. It's contractually permitted, it's legally permitted. We brought consent to assignments in front of this assembly on a number of occasions for a number of different reasons. Question number 2, is it in the best interest of the city to accept this assignment? Internally, staff reviewed, including myself. Mr. Vincent outlined the criteria or the considerations that were done. I was part of that. I feel that what was looked into and what was discovered and the staff's recommendation is well warranted. Thank you.
I appreciate that as the risk manager. I always feel like there's a little bit of risk in this without going back out to bid. I also want to say thank you to CCON for assuming this assignment of lease. I understand they were not an original bidder in this process, but have agreed to ease a burden on McGraw MCG constructors. So I appreciate them being a member of the community and understanding the circumstances that permitted this assignment of lease. Tor?
Just real quick, I think when you heard a lot of sounds around the table, it occurred to me that, I read my packet, I understand what was going on, understood why, understood they checked, so there were no questions. I mean, so again, thank you guys for, it's as usual, the packet was laid out in such a fashion that everything was clear. So thank you.
Anything further from the assembly? Sarah?
Right, on the motion to approve the consent to assignment of lease, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiss,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Yestad.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item G.
So for this next item, kind of a similar item, but framed as a discussion direction decision on of a Class 3 tidelands lease filed by Evergreen Properties LLC at 2309 Halibut Point Road. So tonight, John, I understand Amy has a presentation. And then the outcome that I believe staff is looking for this tonight from the assembly is to, should we go forward with the preparing of a new lease, and Amy will talk about competitive bidding and then some guidance on price, terms, and conditions if the assembly does have any. So Amy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. Amy Ainsley, Planning and Community Development Director. So the request under this item is a request for lease of Tidelands Seaward of 2309 Halibut Point Road. It's commonly or often referred to as Schaefer's Trailer Court. The property was originally owned and leased by the state of Alaska. It was leased to the upland property owner, Albert Schaefer, for a term of 55 years. So that lease commenced in 1965 and terminated in 2020. Those tidelands were transferred to the city and borough of Sitka in 1997. Since its expiration, the lease has been in holdover status, so they've continued to make timely payments as well as tax payments, so they have remained in good standing with the city and borough during the time that the lease has lapsed. Mr. Schaefer passed in 2021, and his wife, William Schaefer, became the sole owner of the Uplands property as a part of sort of rearranging the estate. The property was transferred into an LLC, and that's Evergreen Properties LLC. That Evergreen Properties LLC, as the new upland owner, reapplied for this new tidelands lease, and they plan, per their application, plan to continue using the property, both the uplands and the tidelands, as a mobile and manufactured home park. So generally speaking, property leases that are owned by the municipality are done by competitive bid unless it is found to be inappropriate. And generally the standards that we look at for whether or not a competitive bid is appropriate or not are factors regarding the size, shape, or location of the property in question, or the actual nature of the leasing process itself, whether, going through that leasing process could result in unjust outcomes for an existing lessee or for neighboring property owners. The code also does specifically recognize that upland property owners have a preference to tidelands. And that kind of really speaks to the location and nature of those properties, right? If you are On the upland property, to lease out Tideland seaward of you means that a lessee would probably have to trespass through your property to get to it. So it's generally been recognized that upland property owners have a preference that makes competitive bidding inappropriate. But that is a discussion that kind of needs to take part with every lease we consider. Per the code, our standard terms are a maximum of 35 years and a lease rate of 4.5% of the appraised or lease or assessed value. However, the assembly may require other terms or conditions as they see fit. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at their August 2nd meeting and unanimously recommended approval with the condition that the lease should carry that the property continue to be used as a mobile manufactured home park, and that should be the sole use of the property authorized under the lease. The direction that staff needs from the assembly is, first, whether we should move forward with leasing the property, whether or not we believe competitive bidding is appropriate. The price to assign to it, I provided in your memo, the previous price that was assessed for the lease that was being paid, and also gave you kind of a range of percentages for a lease rate and what the resulting annual payments would be. Also important to note that sales tax and property tax would be additional to those amounts in your memo. Also, the term of the lease, the applicants are requesting the standard 30-year lease. And then if there are any kind of special conditions. So once staff receives this direction from the assembly, we will go and prepare a draft lease, which would then come back to the assembly for approval via ordinance.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Amy while she's in front of us? I'm sure we'll have some more as the process unfolds. Thank you, Amy. Tor?
Yeah, this went before the Planning Commission. I was at that meeting. And just a little warning, if you Google Evergreen LLC, there's other ones that this is not. There's an outfit up in Anchorage that was like, wait a minute, who are these guys? And it's not them. So again, at that meeting, it was discussed and it, in my mind, this is pretty straightforward. It's already being used as a trailer park. I don't think they could really continue. It's a lot of it's fill, I believe now. So it would continue to be as it's been used. The fact that they continued to make the payments when it was kind of in limbo. There's some that might not have done that or might have tried to forget about it. We probably would have, so they didn't do that. And the fact of the matter is we need trailer parks. And so the last thing I would want to do is lose one here at Sitka. So I have no problem with this. I will say that I think that the rate should be roughly what they were already paying. So I would be pushing for 5% if we're looking for a consensus, but I'm not banging on the table about that.
Chris, then Kevin.
Yeah, I totally agree with Tor here. I mean, I think it checks all the boxes for not going out to competitive bid. Yeah, I mean, for all the same reasons Tor was stating, we do need trailer parks. That's Sitka's affordable housing right there. The rate, yeah, I 4.5 or 5. I could go either way. So I'm not real partial, but I'd definitely say one of those lease rates there.
Tim?
Yeah, once again, I mean, I think the packet was real clear as to what our options were, and I concur. I think it makes perfect sense the way it's laid out and what the staff has come forward with, meets with. I think the uses of that particular, I can't imagine someone else using that Tidelands, right, from the uplands. So I agree with the conditions, and again, I'm in 4.5, 5. Let's see what they come back with.
JJ?
Let me ask a few questions of Amy on just what lease terms and such. I imagine if the state did a lot of these 55 or so years ago, we might be seeing more Tideland leases coming up. So some background on the topic. So Per se, if the land were to be sold, the uplands land were to be sold, what does that do to this lease?
If the new upland property owner would like to lease the tideland seaward of the property, they would have to come to the assembly and request an assignment of that lease.
So perhaps if the use did change at that time, because it said they intend to use it as a mobile home park, if the potential future owner were to buy it, because it is commercial land, there's a chance in that, then we'd have to come back to this table and we would look at it again. Okay. So there's no need to stipulate in the lease that this needs to be used for a certain reason.
If the assembly wishes to see a particular use or to be a part to have another decision, if the use were to change, then a specific condition does need to be added to the lease. Our standard lease template generally doesn't specify lease particularly for tidelands. Tidelands are always assumed to have the same zoning as their uplands. And so the standard lease terms are that, whatever is allowable by the zoning on the uplands, you can do on the tidelands unless otherwise specified. So if the assembly does want to specify the use of these tidelands and for it to come back for consideration, if that use were to change, then that does need to be a specific condition.
I'd be interested in if we wanted to discuss that. Thank you, Amy.
Anything else for Amy while she's in front of us?
I would agree with JJ just to say that I think specifying is for a trailer park is a good idea.
Yeah, so, yeah, I concur with both the two members who just spoke. Do you anticipate that being a problem with the current leaseholder if we?
I don't anticipate. That was also the recommendation that came from the planning commission as well, was to include that condition. And, with the applicant at the meeting, they didn't have any issue with that, nor have they raised any issues with that after the planning commission meeting either. So.
Okay, yeah, I would like that included as well. Chris?
Yeah, I agree. I was actually just scrambling, trying to find the actual zoning, and it's multifamily mobile home. I mean, that just as it exists as an R2, would it have any other true function without having to go to planning commission to change its zoning?
So for the R2 MHP zone, it's broadly multifamily and manufactured home parks. There are a range of other conditional uses that could be considered as well. So.
Okay, well, I like JJ's recommendation there for it. So I think that should get thrown in.
So let me see if I summed this up for the assembly. So we do believe that competitive bidding is inappropriate, as the Uplands property owner is the one who leased it. It would be an unjust use to take it from them, and they do have a historical use of the property. We would look for a 30-year term at 5% of assessed value, and the conditions stating that this lease is only to be used for trailer park or trailer park access. Well, I say access only because it's a road now, but to be used in conjunction with facilitating a trailer park. Anything else that I didn't get from the assembly? Amy, anything else you need on that?
That's everything I needed.
Okay, great. The only thing I need is whoever assessed 1.5 acres of waterfront property at $128,000. I need them to come and reassess my 7,000 square foot lot. I think the property tax would go down substantially on that property. Thank you for your time this evening, Amy, and look forward to seeing the lease. And thank you for working with the property owners through their circumstances as well. Bring us to item I tonight. This is a discussion direction decision on whether to proceed with a lease of municipal property on Jarvis Street for use as a community garden. Again, tonight, Amy has a presentation. Also, for the Assembly's benefit, the applicant is here tonight. And if the Assembly wishes, they can speak to their application. And then there are several decision points that Amy will be looking for tonight as well on this. Amy, once again, thank you.
Probably should stay put. All right, thank you. Once again, Amy Ainsley, Planning and Community Development Director. So the applicants for this lease request are two local nonprofits, Transition Sitka and the Sitka Local Foods Network. The overlapping interest between these two organizations really kind of meets at food security as well as sustainable food systems. The groups would like to bring back a community garden in Sitka, which we have not had for approximately probably about 7 or 8 years since the last one closed. And so the group started to look for areas in town where they could have, a good sized community garden. Some of the criteria that they used for site selection included looking for at least a half-acre lot that had good southerly exposure, that wasn't overly steep or irregular in terrain, had reasonable access to neighborhoods, ideally with access to municipal utilities and with general support from the community and some, consensus around wanting to see this as a permanent improvement. So originally, the applicants identified 2 sites. One was located off of Osprey Street at kind of in the Blatchley Middle School complex area. And another one was located at the top of Jarvis Street, uphill of the transfer station and the animal hospital there. Both of those locations were reviewed at a town hall that was held, as well as by the Planning Commission as well. Following feedback and review from those meetings, the applicants have decided to move forward with only the Jarvis Street location. So the materials that you see that went to the Planning Commission include the Osprey Street location, but that is not the subject of tonight's conversation. So just wanted to clarify that. The property that runs there along Jarvis Street has municipal utilities. It's next to vacant city land, as well as land owned by the Raptor Center, as well as the proposed development area for the Sitka Homeless Coalition. The property is undeveloped, heavily vegetated, and is primarily muskeg. It's zoned as public, so public lands district, in which horticulture is an allowed use. So it's also, fits within the zoning. The narrative and perspective design that the applicants have provided for you in your packet and went over, again, at both the town hall as well as at the Planning Commission meeting, I think really helped to paint a nice picture of what the development could look like, as well as some of the anticipated rules of how the garden would be managed, what would be expected of gardeners using the area. However, we know that with some of the challenging terrain that we have in this area, and particularly with a lot of this property having muskeg, it's going to take quite a bit more work to advance the design to get to the level of specifics regarding wetlands impact, drainage, site design, parking, fencing, those kinds of things. And so, it's a little premature at this point to evaluate the proposal on those bases, but I think it's really helpful to kind of paint the picture of what this could look like in the future. So it's kind of interesting moving through this leasing process of finding the right point at which we can make decisions about moving forward, but aligning the work that needs to be done and the investment that needs to be made, along with security and certainty on the part of the applicants or any applicants that would be looking to lease property like this. Overall, the applicants are hoping to secure a long-term lease, probably broken into shorter increments, say, 3 to 5 years, and have renewal terms. It's probably a shorter term, initial term in which there's, a chance to review, to secure and review permittings and site plan reviews and that sort of thing. And also the applicants are requesting for the lease to be offered at low or no cost, given that this is, kind of not a money-making venture, so to speak. It, kind of breaks even just to sort of take care of the garden and is viewed by the applicants as more of a community service as opposed to a business. The direction needed at this point to move forward in the process is for staff to have an understanding from the assembly about whether or not you would like us to proceed with the leasing process, just overall. Are we interested in leasing this city property? It also will need to have a discussion about whether or not competitive bidding is appropriate or not. Again, their code defaults to competitive bidding unless it is found that there's a reason that it would be inappropriate to competitively bid a piece of property. And again, those factors are based on the nature of the property itself or the circumstances of its lease, creating unjust results to an existing lessee or neighboring properties. If the assembly determines that there is nothing that indicates competitive bidding would be inappropriate, i.e. we do need to competitively bid the property, we have to determine whether that competitive bid would be specific to use as a community garden, or would we want to bid that for potentially for other uses? So sort of what is the scope or range of use that you want to see in that bid? And then lastly, what will kind of help us to determine whether we go with a bid process or a request for proposal process is price. Is price the only factor, or is it not even a factor at all? If price is the only factor and whoever bids the highest, then we would go with a bid. If there are other factors for consideration that we would want to consider, or price just isn't a factor at all, that would lead us towards the request for proposal or RFP process. So I think breaking this conversation into two is what I kind of planned for the evening. So this discussion is just, again, do we kind of initiate the process further? Do we want to continue down the road of preparing to lease this property? If so, for what purpose, for what price, if any, and then that will kind of guide our next steps. If the assembly determines that they do want to lease this property and that we do need to do a competitive bid, I'll come back to the assembly at a future meeting to discuss some of the terms that you might want to see associated with a lease, and potentially, evaluation criteria for a request for proposals as well. So, but for tonight, we're just focusing on, do we take the next steps? Do we lease the property? And how do we go about leasing that property?
Thank you. Is there any questions for Amy while she's in front of us? Appreciate it. Thank you. Assembly deliberation, Tor?
Yeah, again, I was at the planning commission meeting when this came up, and it was interesting because at that time they were talking about both sites. And there were a lot of people who didn't like the Osprey Street one. And I kind of looked at it sideways myself. But what was interesting, what came out of that was almost everybody who came up vehemently opposed to the Osprey Street side was supportive of the idea of a community garden at the Jarvis Street location. So while I think if we were talking about Osprey Street, we'd be having a very different conversation. There was a huge amount of support for the community garden at this location. And it was a long meeting, and I spent a lot of time looking at this stuff as we were going. And it occurs to me that, first of all, that land is, well, I guess you can build anywhere. It would be, it's marginally buildable if you want to try and actually build a structure on it, because and they're going to have their work cut out for, obviously it's probably going to be raised beds and things like that, but you could do that because the amount of weight is so not minimal compared to a house. And like I said, at that meeting, and of course we've all seen our emails, we've got a lot of support for this. And I think it's appropriate. There's, well, I guess, tonnage or weight of food that would be coming out of it would probably not be that much. I think there's a lot to be said for both the ability to grow, I think one of these board members complained about the price of mint at the store, and that's exactly the kind of thing that you could grow here and things like that. I brought her some mint from my garden later. There's benefits to a community garden that go way beyond the poundage coming out. And so I think we should do this. I don't think it needs to go to a competitive bid. I think if we did that, it would be a waste of staff time. And, we would be saying, we want you to, we're going to put it out to a bid for a community garden. Well, there's only going to be one bid. And so, and for what it's worth, I think it should be a nominal amount, or little or nothing, but enough to just maintain our control. Obviously Amy's still got a lot of work to do on the design and things like that, but I think we should do this. And again, it was a good hour and a half, 2 hours of testimony. And it was overwhelmingly in support of the idea of the community garden. And I don't think I heard one person talking against the Jarvis Street. Not so much the Osprey Street, but so it was, like I said, well, it was actually a lot of support for this at that meeting. So what's worth.
Kevin?
Thank you, Stephen. I would say I wholeheartedly agree with Tor. The exception being, I would be interested to see what the other members feel about the competitive bid. I've been trying to think about this, that one sticking point, and I keep going back and forth. But I think that, yeah, if this goes forward, the applicants have the work cut out for them. But I really believe personally that, yeah, this, regardless of what happens, say it's all successful, it's not going to solve, it's not going to stop Sitka from having some sort of major problem if there is a food supply issue with transportation getting here. It's not going to solve that, but I see this as the beginning or the seed for what could be, and people will, theoretically see it come to fruition if successful, and then, inspire people to do it in their yards or in other places or other community gardens. So I really believe it's a part of what Sitka does needs. Food security is really, really big issue now more than ever. And I'm glad the applicants have put their heart into this. I don't feel that trying to do this for money is worthwhile at all. I would like to see if, I don't know that they would make money, but if the little that they did could go into a fund for future investments, future gardens. But like I said, the only thing I am hung up on is the competitive bid. I'm not I would like to bypass it, but I don't want to do things inappropriately. I personally, like, if I had to decide right now, I think it's completely appropriate to bypass the competitive bid. But I would like to hear what the other members have to say, and I'd think about that.
And I think I agree with you on that, I want to, but I haven't found a legal reason yet to do as such. So where I'm leaning right now is an RFP to develop a community garden. We can then base it off of criteria that the assembly is desirous of for that chunk of property and still go through a legal process. Brian, I'm sure I'll come to you at some point and ask for your advice on this. But that's kind of where I was standing on that right now. Tim, you had something?
Yeah, I think we'd be rash not to give it a shot and see what the interest is for sure, and whether or not this garden, I'm hung up on the same issue on the RFP, not the RFP, but on the competitive bid. And then just in terms of the lease down the road, I think I'm interested in shorter term increments with more deliverables. So, sort of steps that they will reach in certain periods of time, so that we can help encourage forward motion on this as well. So I think that's part of what I would like to see going forward on this, is even in an RFP situation would be, getting it, reaching milestones, I guess would be the best way to put that. So I agree. This is not a money-making thing for the city. It's a valuable thing for us to do. And if it encourages more gardening, more power to it. And, hopefully, it was interesting reading their proposal. It had a lot of aspirational things. And if it came to fruition, there's gonna be gardens all over the place. So I think that's positive.
JJ?
I like how we just kind of moved down the line, and I've been anchoring these conversations, except for Chris here. Happy to do so. A big part of that quality of life, food security from our strategic plan 1.5. Thank you for community groups to take our goals seriously and work through these initiatives with us. It's just that stick up of how to do it with the process and with public land. You guys pretty much have put a RFP together, so I don't think it'd be too much of an effort to do it through the formal process, because that it's land, we can't quite give it away. We have every intention to help, it seems. You guys really do this service for the town. I think the RFP is the best way to go about it from my past kind of life in architecture and construction, that seems to be the best. Perhaps RFP, maybe an RFQ, if we could throw that in there. And then it doesn't need to be about money. It doesn't need to be a proposal for things. It can just be qualifications based. And you guys are the qualified group in town to pursue a community garden. I don't know how that quite works. Sorry, Amy, to kind of just throw out another word or letter at you. But if it could be an RFQ, that would be a great way to see, I think, the best of all of this work together for our goals and what is legal and what is a good process for the city. If I can encourage the group to kind of look at potentially, I know it's not as great as soils further south towards the animal shelter, but maybe there could be some synergy in doubling up your parking area with what already exists and tying into utilities in a little bit quicker, faster way. I don't see the need to charge for this. I think the electric and water bills are down the line will be enough to show your support, and that could be a good balance for what you're giving and then what the city is getting for this land. Okay, thank you.
Just want to go all the way around the world. That's all.
Love being over here in left field. Yeah, I'm definitely as supportive of this community gardens and food security and this lease. As soon as I read this one, I was really wrestling with throwing it out competitively or just letting it go. And I'm leaning towards an RFP, but definitely not having, the amount, the lease amount being any sort of real factor here. And I'm only saying go to RFP just because it's procedure. It's the proper procedure and the proper avenue to take. And I'm sure that they more than likely will be the only applicant, and that's great. But I just do want to see proper procedure taken. I do agree that maybe short-term increments to start with, and maybe some benchmarks laid in. And then, something, it's not really for this conversation, but I do want to throw it out here, is some sort of bond established. I know when the farm was out at GPIP, they pulled up stakes, it was a bit of a financial burden. So I would like to see maybe a bond put in place here, just in case, a little bit of backup. But all in all, I'm totally supportive of this and want to see it move forward.
Brian, you had some additional information for us?
I'm afraid to say anything because I may be perceived as the monkey wrench thrower here, but I think there is a path forward with determination of inappropriate to be competitive bidding if you have a public hearing on it and fit the square round holes and the round pegs and the round holes. But what I'm hearing from the table is that an RFP, they're maybe looking to do an RFP, which would only require people who are interested in putting a community garden in. And in putting a community garden in is potentially not what the best value of the property could be, or the only use of that property. So I think inherently in any kind of competitive bidding, that's what you're looking for, is when you're saying come lease our property, and we want to try to get the best value out of leasing our property. And if you just start with all we're going to do on it is a community garden, then you are foregoing some other use that could have better value. This is something that should be thought about before just putting out a.
Question, Brian, didn't we do the same thing with the haul out? That we said, here's some land available for a haul out? And aren't we just saying, here's some land available for a garden?
Well, I think that land was different because of the way it is situated down out at the GPIP place, but. And I think that RFP, because I was broad enough to allow other kind of uses or the like.
Okay.
I think there's a distinction there
Okay.
to be thought about.
Sure.
Yes, Brian stole my thunder there a little bit. But to me, the difference between an RFP saying we want to have a community garden and us determining that it's in the community's best interest to just lease it, with Amy, I'm sure it will be a very comprehensive document, is semantics. And there is a process to determine that something is in the community good. And that's why we're not going to go to a competitive bid. And I don't think going to an RFP for a community garden is actually a true RFP. I mean, it's because there's obviously only one person can do it. And we're making the assumption that it's in the community good. So why don't we just say, this is in the community good. Amy, go make us the good contract that protects us, kind of like the idea of the bond. And, rather than put an extra step in that is preordained, I guess, if that makes, and like I say, it's perfectly legitimate to say something is in the community good.
See, I like that idea.
Brian, is that a legal course of action?
I think it would fit. I mean, I don't want to be conclusive right here on at the table, but it sounds okay to me. I want to put some more time into pondering that. So
thank you. John?
Same as Brian, I don't want to drag on the process at all necessarily and throw a curveball here, but there is also the option to put out an RFI that simply, because those are non-binding, you put out an RFI that says the city and borough of Sitka is interested in leasing this parcel of property, looking for interested parties to provide not necessarily a proposal, but their submittal of an idea on their uses for the assembly to consider. That doesn't mean that person proposing has to, if that turns into an RFP after you do that market research stage, that doesn't necessarily mean that person that submitted an RFI has to respond to the next step. But I think that is an option if the assembly chose to do some more market research on possible uses of the property.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a couple thoughts to mine. And then I'll end by kind of surmising our discussion tonight and making sure Amy doesn't need anything else from us. I do have a concern about the future use of this area. A 30-year lease, while it sounds great for the gardeners, and I'd like to provide that, I would like some sort of get out clause in this. If 20 years down the road, it's determined that there is a higher and better use of that property, I want the ability for the city, probably within a growing season notice or a year's notice, to ask to vacate the lease. I also would request that the city be very protective and thorough in this process, but helpful. I think it's been very clear tonight that the assembly is desirous of this. I think it's very clear that the public is desirous of this. So I want this to happen for our people. And then just finally, just a personal observation of the location. I think it's going to be extremely important to put netting over the top of this location. I had a boat parked right across the street for a while, and all the ravens from the transfer station absolutely destroyed my seats. They pulled anything rubber off of the boat. and cost quite a lot of damage. So I think it'll be important to protect the carrots and the berries from all the ravens. Hopefully our compactor and everything that we're having to do due to AML's regulations alleviates some of the bird issues there, but just a little knowledge of the area. And then, so what I'm hearing from the assembly tonight is that, yes, we want to go forward with leasing this property and go forward in a legal way that allows this to happen. So Brian said he's going to look into, is there a way to make, is there a way that is appropriate to go forward without competitive bidding? And if not, then how do we develop an RFP that captures the public's wishes for the use of this land? And then it does indicate that later Amy would come back for, if we do have an RFP, that we would come back for any terms and conditions of the lease and qualifying proponents for the RFP. Did I miss anything? The bonding, we would prefer some sort of performance evaluation and some sort of bonding in this to make sure that the site is left clean at the very end. Did I miss anything? Yes, please, JJ.
Add a little bit about, bear protection for this area. It's near an edge. Add a little bit about just security, lighting, whatever we need there. Just best stewards of the land principles, please.
And yeah, I didn't say it, but I agree with the benchmarks idea. Obviously, like, break it up into smaller terms at first, and as performance is shown, extend those terms.
Anything else from the assembly? Amy, does that capture what you need at this point? Thank you. All right, so that wraps up that item. That next item will be item K. Deputy Mayor, I would ask for recusal on item K, as I have a business that could directly benefit from any sales tax-free holidays the assembly might institute.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. So that brings us to item K, decision on whether to allow sales tax-free day following the Thanksgiving holiday inset dates. So Sarah, we need a motion.
I move to authorize Friday, November 24th and Saturday, November 25th as sales tax-free days for 2023, noting the sales tax-free days will not be applicable to any sale of fuel, alcoholic beverages, tobacco products, and marijuana, nor affect any sale which is part of a continuing obligation of the buyer to pay the seller over time.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, back to the assembly for discussion. I mean, we've done this forever, so.
Yeah, kind of seems like a tradition.
Yeah.
So
idea.
not going to be the one to object.
Okay, so no discussion. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to authorize November 24th and 25th as sales tax-free days. Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
And the motion passes 5-0.
Masterfully handled, sir. That'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. My name is Joel Hansen, and I just want to take a moment to thank you all for, I'm the project lead for the Sitka Community Gardens project, and I wanted to thank you all for your working on this. I wanted especially to thank Director Ainsley and Administrator Leach and the Planning Department for all the advice and guidance that they've given us in getting this far. We're not land developers. we're gardeners and the community members, and it is quite a learning curve to try to figure out where to go next, and they've helped a lot. So I wanted to show our appreciation for you and for them, and that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Richard Ween. I've seen the plans for the community garden, and I've spoken with the principals, and they've done an enormous amount of work for this. There's a lot of thought within this process, and they seem to have kind of gotten basically all the angles, and they certainly deserve the opportunity to do this. Clearly, nothing is perfect. There's a YouTube for making a Thanksgiving turkey, since we're talking about tax-free, and it's by Tanta Marie. And she just looks you in the camera and it says, just put the turkey in the oven. She uses another word. And I think you're overthinking the community garden. Just put it in the oven and do it. And we will see what happens. And with a group like that, who have been very thoughtful, I can only say they'll have success. The other thing is if you want mint, you can grow that in your window. You know, it's a windowsill herb or whatever it is. Another aspect is on the 22nd, you guys had an executive committee which spoke about Block 4, Lot 4. I know exactly what that is, and I remember speaking about it on multiple occasions. There are going to be some FOIAs coming to get additional information and leasing and all this other stuff. I know it seems to be hush-hush, but it's just very bizarre. I'm very surprised the Sitka Sentinel didn't put a story out on that. I also, it's interesting that item J was removed because that highlighted something, because I know something's going on in the electric department, some personnel movements and other things, which I think are very important. And I really just don't see any transparency here. I'd also like to vote for a home health discussion. You know, what are there, how many letters have been in the Sentinel with, you know, from, you know, outstanding members of the community. And this is like the National Enquirer. You know, people want to know. And I think that's important. Another thing is, I always mention oil. Alaska oil barrel is like 93 plus. Today, Brent crude was over 92. Let's forget about West Texas. It was 87. But the important thing is that the Saudis, Russians, and others are squeezing the oil supply. Biden has drained the strategic oil reserve. And there's, at least in the economic treatises I read, there's going to be a big squeeze on fossil fuels. And that affects Sitka because all of our goods and services depend upon fossil fuels. So enjoy.
No one else for persons to be heard this evening?
Good morning. My name is Austin Cranford. I just wanted to go back to the assembly wages real quick. I do like that Leach continues to bring up the Sitka home charter, but he has for the second time now ignored section 1701 of the Sitka home charter that specifically specifies no elected official may vote on any question on which he or she has a substantial financial interest. Only 3 of the assembly members are up for re-election. 4 of the assembly members, including the mayor, will receive this pay raise next year. This is considered a financial interest because substantial is not defined in the home charter anywhere. And I did enjoy Ms. Carlson's comment where she said 20 years ago, the pay raise was approved, so we can go ahead and approve it now, is essentially how I heard it. Well, 20 years ago, we elected Bush into office, so should he be elected into office again? That voters change their minds. I think a 20-year gap is more than enough to let the voters speak their mind again. And then on my second issue of the day, which was not on the discussion, is Leach brought up during a taxi meeting, I believe about a month and a half, 2 months ago, that his interest was in the safety and security of the community. However, prior to coming to this meeting, I figured I would just drive around town to check on something. And I noticed even when we were having torrential downpours, 47 vehicles just heading out Halibut Point Road had no lights on at all. 6 only had their running lights on. And that's not counting the lights that only had one working, had some busted out, had some burnt out, etc. I checked the state law. State law plus the DMV handbook states that if you have less than 1,000 feet of visibility, your light should be on. I had my wipers on full blast, couldn't see the car in front of me because they didn't have their lights on. And the handbook states that if your wipers are on, your headlight should be on. And this entire time that I'm driving, I've not seen one cop car. I don't see anybody being pulled over. It's clearly a safety hazard. We're approaching monsoon season. We have winter here in another couple months, and we have people not obeying the traffic laws. I would like to see the assembly look into why our traffic laws are not being enforced. Thank you. Bye.
Anyone else for public comment or persons to be heard this evening? Thank you.
Yeah, Kent Barkow. I just wanted to say thank you for recognizing the community good of a community garden and the idea of a seed that could be replicated in people's own yards and other places in the community. So thank you.
Anyone else this evening? That'll bring us to reports. I have no report this time. John?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll come back with a better report after next week, but I have nothing really to report over the past few weeks, just that we will have Southeast Conference hosted here in Sitka and Harrigan Hall next week, I think the 19th through the 21st. So I'll provide a report after that's complete. Thanks.
Brian?
I'll be out of the office next Monday and Tuesday and back in the office on Wednesday, medical reasons.
Liaison representatives. JJ?
As Tourism Task Force representative, both Chris and I went to the last work session earlier this month. And that on a Wednesday evening last week, the 6th, they are planning to look at Directive 4, the best management practices, and have a community meeting in 2 weeks here at the Centennial Building on the evening of Thursday, the 28th, to get some feedback from the community. It'll be in the paper, it'll be advertised on their draft best practices packet. It's out with industry members right now for review, and we'd like some community participation in looking at that on Thursday evening, the 28th of September.
Any other liaison representatives? Sarah? You had one chance.
I'm too slow, sorry. So I ended up going to the Parks and Rec meeting today. I'm sure all of you have read some of our emails about Moeller Field conflicts, and it seems like it is somewhat resolved. So there was a motion for the Parks Coordinator to facilitate subcommittee meetings scheduling of the field every quarter. And the Parks and Rec director, head of Parks and Rec, will be kind of leading it, and it sounds like kind of get the final say, but the subcommittee will be trying to help with all the scheduling, because it's a bit of a conflict between some of the baseball leagues and soccer. So I'm hoping that maybe it gets smoothed out now and we don't have any more complaints.
Any other liaison representatives? Sarah?
All right, well, the municipal election is approaching rapidly. Our office has been getting ready for early voting, which starts here on Monday, September 18th. It runs weekdays through October 2nd. Hours are 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and it'll be rooms 2 and 3, which can be accessed from the outside of the building. Some other options available for voting. You can choose from mail, email, fax. There's the personal rep option, and then of course, voting in person on election day. The polls are open here from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Great, thank you. Are there any other reports this evening? Seeing none, that would bring us to our executive session this evening.
I move to go into executive session to discuss the Sitka Rocky Gutierrez Airport Terminal Building lease with the state of Alaska, the immediate knowledge of which would adversely affect the finances of the municipality, and invite Finance Director Melissa Haley and Public Works Director Ron Vincent.
Second.
Is there any public comment on going into executive session? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to go into executive session, Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes?
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0, and we will be meeting in room 4, just down the hallway here on the right.
Thank you, Assembly. Take a break on your way in as well, as we haven't had one in a minute. All right, the assembly is seated. A motion to reconvene.
I move to reconvene as the assembly.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, assembly. We are reconvened. That would bring us to adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Again, thank you, assembly. We are adjourned.